Hi there, I'm Kazak, guide writer, theory crafter, and simulation craft maintainer for Frost Death Knight, and welcome to my quick guide for Frost Death Knights in patch 11.2. This guide is going to be a brief overview that covers the essential knowledge you will need to play Frost Death Knight in 11.2. I'm not going to cover anything too nuanced or too in-depth. If you want something like that, I have a linked video where I do that. This guide is going to be brief and is targeted primarily towards people who are not familiar with Frost Death Knight. Frost's gameplay is defined by proc management and resource management and getting cleanly into cooldown windows. We use two primary resources for our rotational abilities, runes and runic power. I have them tracked here on a weak aura. In the middle of my screen here, the top bar is runes, the bottom bar is runic power. Basic way they work is abilities cost runes, runes generate runic power, 10 runic power per rune spent. You spend runic power on Frost Strike or Glacial Advance, and when you spend runic power, your runic power spent has a chance to instantly generate a rune. So the resources both generate each other and create this sort of feedback loop. The two main procs that Frost Death Knight worries about are Rhyme, which makes your next Howling Blast consume no runes and do extra damage, and Killing Machine, which makes auto-attack critical strikes have a chance to make your next Obliterate deal frost damage instead of physical damage and critically strike. Killing Machine also works on Frost Scythe, which always does frost damage, and when it consumes Killing Machine, it will deal 4 times its normal damage instead of 2 times. The key to playing Frost well is to manage these procs. You don't want to waste either of them, and you want to generate them as much as possible. After that, you want to make sure your resources are in balance, but if you're playing your rotation well, these things should just flow and you won't have to think about them too hard. For cooldowns, Frost has 2 main cooldowns at its baseline. It has Pillar of Frost on a 45-second cooldown, which increases your strength by a percentage, and it has Breath of Sindragosa. This is a 90-second cooldown, and when you activate it, it grants you a charge of Empower Rune Weapon and deals damage to enemies in front of you for at least 8 seconds. You can extend this duration by consuming Killing Machine or Rhyme while Breath is active. It deals full damage to its main target and deals reduced damage to secondary targets, so you want to make sure that you are targeting the most important enemy when you have Breath going. Our main pseudo cooldown is Empower Rune Weapon. It deals damage to enemies at range and generates a Killing Machine proc and generates runic power. This is off the GCD. It's kind of like Fire Blast if you've played Fire Mage. It removes downtime from our rotation. Finally, although it's not a cooldown itself, can be thought of as one. Obliteration enhances Pillar of Frost so that Frost Strike, Glacial Advance, and Howling Blast will always grant a Killing Machine proc. It does a couple other things too, but these are less important to think about right now. The main thing you should take away is that when you are inside Pillar of Frost, if you do not have a Killing Machine proc, you want to press Frost Strike, Glacial Advance, or Howling Blast to generate a proc and make the most out of having Pillar of Frost active. We have 2 hero talents available to us, Rider of the Apocalypse and Deathbringer. Deathbringer adds another cooldown. You will macro this into Pillar of Frost. This cooldown puts a mark on an enemy target. You put stacks on that mark, and at 45 stacks, the mark detonates, and then you get 2 stacks of a buff called Exterminate. That makes your next 2 Obliterates or Frost Scythes cost half the runes, and they summon 2 scythes to strike your enemy. 1 primary target strike, and then an AoE strike. Rider of the Apocalypse is a little more passive. Instead, as you spend runes, you have a chance to call the aid of one of the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse to help you. Each of them has a unique ability, although you don't have to think about their unique ability too much. Playing your standard rotation will generally make the most of them. The only thing you really ever have to maybe think about is Trollbane, because he casts Chains of Ice on your targets, and you want to attack enemies that have Chains of Ice on them. The capstone for Rider of the Apocalypse is Apocalypse Now, and it makes Froststorm's Fury call all 4 horsemen to aid you for 20 seconds. So Froststorm's Fury rounds out our list of cooldowns if you are playing Rider of the Apocalypse. Frost is a spec that excels at dealing primary target damage without sacrificing secondary target damage. What I mean by that is even though we have talents that deal reduced damage to secondary targets, like Breath of Sindragosa, Frost is fairly unique in its ability to deal respectable single target output while also dealing high damage to nearby adds. Most other specs in the game have to lean more one way or the other, but Frost can do both without significantly compromising on either. It also has fantastic defensive tools through Icebound Fortitude and Anti-Magic Shell. These two abilities will get you through almost any livable damage event in the game. Icebound Fortitude gives you an immunity to stuns and reduces all damage taken by 30%, and Anti-Magic Shell gives you a large shield that absorbs magic damage and also prevents the application of harmful magical effects. And what that means is a lot of abilities that hit you and then apply a debuff don't work against Anti-Magic Shell. It will block the debuff from applying, and this lets us do a lot of neat things where we can ignore a mechanic. And if that wasn't enough, we also have Death's Advance, or Death's Charge in this case, because I have the talent from Riders of the Apocalypse, which replaces Death's Advance. And both of these spells grant you an immunity to knockbacks, which is particularly good in Raid. Finally, I will briefly touch on Rune Forges. Rune Forges are unique to Death Knights. You have to go to Acheris to apply them. You can also apply them in Maldraxxus and Shadowlands, but that is much more out of the way when we have Deathgate available to us. Always, always, always have Rune of the Fallen Crusader. It is our best Rune Forge by far. It grants us a significant strength buff whenever it procs. After that, if you are playing dual wield builds, you will take either Rune of Razor Ice if you are playing Shattering Blade to stack Razor Ice faster on your targets, or you will play Rune of the Stone Skin Gargoyle, which just increases all of your stats slightly. Now we will talk about talent builds briefly. There's one real talent build that we will play with, and it is what I have on screen right now. There are some slight variations we can make, but this represents the core of what we will play. There are two main variations of this build. For Mythic Plus, you may decide to switch Frost Reaper for Everfrost for more AoE damage. The other primary variant is one where we skip Frost Scythe and these two talents, Biting Cold and Gathering Storm, that buff Remorseless Winter, and instead we take Runic Overflow, Icy Onslaught, and Frigid Executioner, and the rest of the tree looks the same. This offers slightly more single target output because we are not having to spend a point on Frost Scythe, which we will never use in single target. However, anytime there are adds present, it will likely be worth it to go ahead and swap back so that Remorseless Winter is buffed up and you have Frost Scythe available to you. Remorseless Winter is so good because of this talent of Frozen Dominion. It makes Remorseless Winter, which is usually a button on a 20-second cooldown that we have to press before cooldowns, a fully passive ability that happens whenever we press Pillar of Frost. And so because we are always getting that free Remorseless Winter, why not make sure we buff it up with Biting Cold and Gathering Storm? If you were to play Deathbringer, you would play pretty much the same build. The only difference is you do not have to take Frostworm's Fury, and so you can swap this point out and instead pick up Everfrost in the Cleave variant, or if you are playing the full single target variant, you can do kind of whatever you want with this point. Inexorable Assault is a good option, or a second point in Runic Overflow. This point is pretty flexible. Now, let's talk about rotation. Our first priority is to press Obliterate or Frost Scythe in AoE if you have 2 Killing Machine procs, or if you have 1 proc and about at least 3 runes. The idea is that if you have 2 stacks, you are capped on stacks and want to get rid of them immediately. If you are not capped on stacks, you don't want to drive yourself empty on runes, because you risk then getting to 2 stacks quickly again and not having the runes to spend them. So you only spend on 1 Killing Machine proc as long as your runes are healthy. If you're low on runes, you are better off frost striking, seeing if you can get a rhyme proc to get some empower rune weapon cooldown through Frostbound Will, and then spending that killing machine. The reason we play around killing machine in this way is because of the talent killing streak. It's new to this expansion, and it makes Obliterate or Frost Scythe in AoE consume all killing machine stacks to deal increased critical strike damage. Important thing with this is that consuming 2 stacks does a little extra damage. It does more damage than consuming 1 stack, but it does not deal the same amount of damage as consuming 1 stack twice. The 1 damage event is smaller than 2 separate damage events. But why do we still care about 2 stack versus 1 stack? The main idea is you really don't want to cast Obliterate without Killing Machine if you can avoid it, because Obliterate without Killing Machine deals physical damage. It only deals a little bit, and that then gets reduced by the enemy's armor. If we have Killing Machine, Obliterate deals frost damage, it bypasses enemy armor, it scales with our mastery, and there's some other tie-on effects. But the main idea that you should take away from this is Obliterate without Killing Machine is bad, you don't want to do it, and that's why it's a little bit fuzzy for do you send Obliterate at 1 Killing Machine stack or 2, because even though it is technically worse damage to send at 2 stacks, you are losing, quote, a proc. You play this way to ensure your runes are healthy so that you aren't wasting procs while also minimizing how many Obliterates without Killing Machine you're getting. So I hope that made sense. It's a little past the beginner scope, but I do think that that is a point that people will get hung up on a little bit. If you can't do either of those things, and let's say you just have 2 runes and 1 Killing Machine, then you will Obliterate. If you are inside Pillar of Frost, you can press Howling Blast without Rhyme to generate a Killing Machine proc, but this will rarely come up. The opener is pretty straightforward. We need 60 runic power to activate Breath, so all you really do is press Empower Rune Weapon and Obliterate, and you have your 60 runic power, and then you press Frostworm's Fury first, and then Pillar of Frost and Breath of Zaragoza, and away you go. If you are low on runes or don't have any Killing Machine procs, your next priority is to spend Rhyme. If you don't have Rhyme up for your Howling Blast, your next priority will be to Frost Strike to try and generate one of those Rhyme procs. For the AoE rotation, it will work the exact same way, and you will press Frost Scythe and Glacial Advance instead of Obliterate and Frost Strike. You will switch to the AoE rotation at 3 targets. At 2 targets, Frost Strike and Glacial Advance are pretty close to equal. With Rider's builds, Hungering Thirst will push Frost Strike a little bit better, and for Obliterate and Frost Scythe, Obliterate is much more damage with Killing Machine at 2 targets. You're only hitting 1, but you're doing much more damage to that 1 target than you are dealing to each target if you had used Frost Scythe. Now at 3 targets, Frost Scythe pulls back out at either even or ahead if Cleaving Strikes is active, and then 4 and onward, Frost Scythe just runs away with it. So now to show you an example of the rotation in action, I'm going to do a quick little demo here on the dummy. You can see that there's nothing super complicated going on. We just get into cooldowns, and then once in cooldowns, I'm doing my best to consume Killing Machine, and when I can't do that, I am alternating Frost Strike or Howling Blast, depending on if I have Rhyme up. It's really not too much to talk about here. Next, for gearing, I will cover some basic guidelines. Your stat priority will be, roughly speaking, Mastery first, then Critical Strike, then Haste, but always sim yourself with your gear to see what comes up as best. For crafted gear and embellishments, you have 2 options. you can either do what I have here, which is Dawn Thread on either boots or belt, depending on if you have the cantrip boots from the Demon Hunter fight. Once you get those cantrip boots, you will want to craft a belt, but before that point, boots are acceptable. But Dawn Thread on boots and wrist. Alternatively, you can put Writhing Armor Banding on your wrists and use a crafted weapon instead. For this season, we are, barring further changes from Blizzard, going to be playing two-hand in all content, so you will craft a two-handed weapon. If you are not already aware, Frost can either dual wield one-hand weapons or it can use a single two-hander, thanks to the passive Might of the Frozen Wastes, which makes your Obliterates and Frost sides do 30% more damage, and your auto attack critical strikes will always grant Killing Machine, whereas dual wield auto attacks only have a chance to get Killing Machine on a crit auto. However, dual wield still procs Killing Machine much more often through auto attacks than two-hand. Two-hand needs this guaranteed proc because it auto attacks much slower. But with current tuning, we will be using a two-hander this patch, simply because it buffs Obliterate so much. Finally, for trinkets, you will want one on-use trinket and one passive trinket. Your passive trinket can either be Astral Antenna or the Pacemaker from Floodgate, and your on-use trinket can be one of three options. It can be Araz's Ritual Forge from the raid, it can be Unyielding Nether Prism, and if you get Unyielding Nether Prism, you'll just pair it with every breath. You can also skip using this for a breath and bank up your stacks for the following breath, because this takes about 180 seconds to stack up all the way. 2 breath cooldowns is also 180 seconds, and then you can dump everything for one big spike during cooldowns. You will do this whenever you have a late lust or damage amp in a fight. Your final option for an on-use trinket will be Cursed Stone Idol out of Halls of Atonement. This does have a channel time, so use it before you start your cooldowns, but this is also very good for us. That wraps it up for this video. If you have any questions or are looking for more detailed information, my Wowhead guide is linked in the description, and you can probably find it there. If not, the Death Knight Discord is also linked, and someone there will be able to answer your question. Thanks for watching, and until next time.